Welcome back. This is episode 3 of Facebook Auction Live. Today we're going to discuss several key themes for advertisers who are considering or in the process of expanding their target audience beyond their home country or region. My name is Chidi. I'm the marketing science lead on the auction and delivery team. Joining me this afternoon, we have a brilliant panel of Facebook experts. Kara, who is on the global marketing manager on the cross-border business team. We have Jay, who is the product marketing manager on the cross-border business team. And finally, Greg, who is on the global auction delivery team and specializes on regions throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Before we get started, thank you for all the wonderful, amazing questions that were submitted in advance of today's discussion. As always, I have an iPad here to also answer questions from the live audience. If you're watching right now and have a question for one of our subject matter experts, please post your questions in the comment section below this caption. A few months ago, eMarketer published an article stating that cross-border e-commerce continues to grow as more of the world's population becomes digital buyers, and retailers become better able to facilitate these transactions. In 2016, Forrester Research forecast that worldwide business-to-consumer cross-border e-commerce would reach $424 billion by 2021, making up 15% of all online commerce. Kara, why don't you kick us off? Why even go cross-border?
So there's a bunch of different ways to answer this question, and I really would like to rephrase it as, why not? So globalization as a word tends to get a bad rap, but I actually think it leads to a lot of opportunity. So if we look at the explosion of mobile and the uptick in connectivity, that actually leads to a huge opportunity as far as democratizing the way that we look at business. No longer is it just big businesses that can take advantage of this global economy, but anybody that has a mobile phone and something to sell, whether it be a product or a service, has that opportunity. So I think now is the perfect time.
What are some of the challenges or roadblocks that you hear from advertisers? Can you shed some light on things like shipping, taxation, or even customer service?
Yes, we do hear that quite often, and there are definitely ways to look at that as far as research goes. So different government websites have really good insight into what shipping can look like, especially within trade groups, which we allow for targeting. We can talk about that a little bit later on. When we look at taxation, that's really up to how you're setting up your business and how you want to address that yourselves. I'm sorry, what was the last one you mentioned?
So it was taxation and customer service.
And customer service. So actually, that one is a really interesting one. We see that across the board, if people aren't able to get a hold of you and they have a question, they're most likely not going to purchase and never purchase again. So that's something really to think about, not just as far as localizing for a language specifically that you're doing business with, but also on how you do that. Do people prefer a message type system like we see in Southeast Asia, or do they prefer phone contact? It's actually the same with shipping as well. If shipping timelines aren't clearly laid out, people are most likely not going to buy from you. So that's something to really consider. They don't necessarily care if it's a long duration for shipping. They just want it clear and stated up front.
Can you provide us with some examples of how advertisers have successfully expanded outside of their home countries or even home regions?
Yeah, that's a great one. We actually have a new website as well that we'll share with at the end of this. But one of our newer ones is a company called Mapiful. And what they do is custom-made maps. And I love that personally because I'm a traveler myself at heart. So I actually have one of their products in my home. And what they saw and what they had was an audacious goal to tackle Black Friday, which is insane because everybody is looking at Black Friday around the world, knowing that it's a huge shopping day. So what they did was actually use one of our newer opportunities at the time called International Lookalikes. And what they did was target 1 million people in 4 days. And when's the last time you could really do that in a scalable way, at a cost-effective way? On top of that, not only did they see results, they saw a 1.3x return on those ad spends. So it was a really effective way for them to tackle a day where everybody is trying to get sales.
That's amazing. How should an advertiser think about expansion strategies?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. So we've introduced some new tools that are hopefully really helpful for this. The way I would start with it and think about it is we have what's called a cross-border insights finder that we'll be able to put on the new website at the end of this. And what that allows you to do is look by region or country to see what your opportunities are. Be it a 12-month flowing rate of how you see seasonality, costs in the auction, how many people you want to reach, quite a few different ways to look at that. And from there, you can really start to hone in on your strategy, whether it be region by region, country by country, and how you look at that, who you target. From there, you can actually go into what we have as audience insights to see what is the demographic of those people. Where are they from? What do they care about? And from there, we have a new site for Facebook Facebook IQ, which is our research arm. And that can take you one step further. So not only who are these people demographic-wise, but what do they care about? What are they spending their time on? And how do they want to communicate with different businesses? So it's a really robust way to kind of look at that holistic picture.
Staying with expansion strategies, what works best in the auction, Jay?
So the way to think about it first is always think about people in this case. So we're kind of flipping the script here when it comes to marketing cross-border. Previously, what an advertiser would have to do is, let's say they're in the US, they would have to go country by country in terms of enabling their shipping, their payments, and all these other things. And their marketing would follow suit. They'd basically they'd go to the next country and then the next country. But the way you should think about the Facebook auction in thinking about expansion is treat Facebook as this massive country of 1.9 billion people, right? And that should be how you should actually set up your budget and your ad sets. Because what actually happens there, take everyone you can serve today, put it into one ad set, and our delivery will have more signals to actually find the right conversions for you. And a good example of this is a Canadian e-commerce company that we worked with. Now, they actually previously went market by market, went from US to Canada to Australia to, again, UK, and other major English-speaking markets. And they had good results. They got to about 2 to 3x return on ad spend. And that would be in separate different ad sets. But when they actually tried worldwide targeting, because they could actually have worldwide shipping, they actually did that and saw 6 times their return on their ad spend. And again, that was because the signals from every different country and people across the world could really cross-pollinate and give our delivery system more information and more conversions for the advertiser.
What do we recommend to advertisers who try using their lookalikes in new regions?
So the first tip is this: use a very high-quality seed audience of previous converters that you've seen. That's step number 1. But step number 2 is, again, don't narrow yourself down in the auction. Don't specifically go for one market when you pick your lookalike audience. Try and put as many many countries as you can serve in that same audience. So again, let's say I'm an advertiser, I'm a small business, and I'm sitting in Singapore, and I've just expanded to Europe. I would take my high quality seed audience in Singapore, and I would use a European lookalike audience rather than just going individually for the UK or for France. Giving us more information and more signals helps us find you more conversions.
How do you define high quality?
So high quality is all about previous conversions who are valuable to you. Okay. So this depends on the advertiser, but things like, for example, they have a high basket size, or they've actually convert their actual purchase on your website rather than people who've just added to the cart.
And what would you say for advertisers who are asking the question, why am I not seeing success when I expand to other countries?
So one of the biggest issues that we do see is quite narrow targeting, which is similar to the point I mentioned before. Like, even if someone does put a country in one ad set, they'll layer on all these other types of targeting, and that actually limits our delivery signals. So what I would say is try and put as much as you can under one budget in one ad set, and let our delivery find the right people for you.
Okay, and Greg, this is basically your world, right? So you're extremely knowledgeable about the auction. You speak to advertisers all the time. Do you want to add to that?
Sure. I guess just to build on what Jay was saying, Jay mentioned about targeting, but it's also about the bid, right, and having the appropriate budget. My primary school math teacher always kind of said, start with a simple analogy and kind of just build your way up. So I figured I'd give you guys something to visualize it. We do have a single community, but think of the different countries as, let's say you have 2 different beakers, right? In the beaker, in one beaker you have 5 red marbles, 5 black marbles, and the next you have 8 black marbles and 2 red marbles. Now imagine the red marbles represent your opportunity, the people that you need to hit at your budget, right? Now, by combining the 2 beakers together, you obviously have more opportunity, right? It makes sense to capture those 2 people from the beaker that has 2 red marbles, right? However, each country has different supply and demand dynamics in the auction. And so the appropriate bid and the appropriate budget for each country will be different. We would advise using perhaps auto bid as a price discovery mechanism and seeing how much of a bid you really need to actually be successful in the auction within that country.
So that's a great reason why you should use auto bid. But what are some of the reasons why you would use manual bid?
So this is a manual bid. we look at as almost like a kind of a safety blanket, right? So auto bid just is meant for you to give your whole budget away, right? So if that's what you need to do, that's fine. But if you look at, for example, our Insights Finder, we have these 12-month trend lines that actually show you kind of the price variations in the auction due to spiking demand. For example, around Christmas time or Black Friday, right, as you mentioned. And so for those times, it depends on what your priority is, right? So if your priority is to give away your budget and to get that delivery, and you don't really care if you spend higher, if your CPM spike because of the demand, right? So because prices rise, you don't mind that, go with the auto bid. However, if you would like almost like a safety blanket as a hedge, I would say, you know what, put a manual bid, and this will prevent you from overspending too much. Now, you might not actually be competitive in the auction, and so you might not get all the inventory that you wanted, right? But you won't be paying maybe sky-high prices for a very temporary amount of time. So you really need to think about what's important to you. Is it to give away and get that inventory, or are you more worried about kind of maintaining relatively consistent costs throughout the year?
Okay. And how do I know if I should set up different ad accounts for each country or just one?
So I would say as Facebook, we always, and I'm sure these guys will agree with me, we always try to make things simple, right? We don't want there to be an incentive for you to have extra work. And so I would say that if maybe there's be like some logistical reasons, maybe it's some different currency accounts, but essentially we would want to make things simple, and we're constantly working harder and harder just to make things as simple as possible for you, so you would have no reason not to use a single account across different countries.
Okay, so we get that question all the time from Tim Bird.
Sure.
Actually, he asks that question a lot. Another question that I have on my mind is, if I duplicate my international ad, why is it that CPA is not the same as the original ad?
So think of it this way, right? If you create a new ad and it goes into the auction, we need to learn more about it and how it really performs. So I like to give an example, for example, with flipping a coin, right? So if I had a regular coin and I flipped it twice and I asked you, what do you think the probability of heads will be, right? You'll say 50%. But if I got 2 heads or 2 tails, you wouldn't necessarily be super surprised, right? That's fine, that happens. Now imagine if I did that now 100 times and I got all 100 heads, right? You would be very surprised, and especially if I did maybe 1,000 or 10,000 times and it was all heads, then you would think, okay, maybe something's fishy, right? And so statistics is called the law of large numbers, and essentially it says that the observed probability approaches the theoretical probability the more trials you have, right? So as you let our system do its job and kind of see these observations, our system gets much more accurate in terms of predicting how your ad will do in the auction.
Okay. And do I need to adjust my creative to appeal to a new market? Kara, this question's for you.
So ideally, yes. Not necessarily when you're first starting off. So when you're thinking about worldwide targeting, for example, it's pretty hard to know exactly what's going to appeal in all of those different markets. So really this is when our testing and reiterating comes into play, is to test a bunch of different things in one campaign so they can all learn together and deliver what's best for which audience. As you become more mature as a company, this is really where I think you can turn to areas like Facebook IQ that have those in-depth studies on people. But we also have a new solution called Creative Hub, where you can actually go in not only to be inspired by creative from around the world, but also to mock up and see what things would look like in feed on a mobile device, which is going to be so much more key, especially when we start to think about the really big opportunity that is emerging markets. When those people come online, the next billion, it's only going to be on a mobile device. They're not going to have a laptop or a desktop of any kind. So this is really the opportune time to get comfortable with that creative. But you can also share from the Creative Hub to other colleagues to see if they like it, get approvals. You can also create the ad directly from there as well. So it's a good seamless experience. How to look at that.
Kara, how should advertisers think about using different languages when going for cross-border?
Yes, I think this is actually similar to the creative side of it. It's okay to do English first. We get that question a lot. There are quite a few countries out there that do speak English, and we see that across the board. I can have Jay play on that a little bit more, talk about details. But again, as you mature as a company and you want to go deeper in a place, think about how you like to personally experience things like customer service and payments. you'd probably want that in your native language to make sure that nothing's being hidden or that you're not misinterpreting something. So that's something to think about as far as longer term success. But Jay, what would you say about the language?
On that side there, it's actually quite interesting. We see a lot of the advertisers actually seeing a lot of success by using English. And probably not what they'd expect as well. I mean, for example, in India, we actually have more English speakers in India than there are in the whole population of Australia. So again, people are generally focused on going for English-speaking markets and thinking about going, what are the major English-speaking markets in the world? But actually, there are countries that might surprise you. And they're used to transacting in, for example, a currency which you may be using domestically and actually transacting in English as well. So the big thing is try using English or try using your first language or your currencies across worldwide and see what happens, because you may be surprised.
Okay, just as a reminder to everybody out there, if you have any additional questions, please post them under this caption. All right, so for the next question, what are some new products that Facebook is working on?
Cool. So two different ones here to call out. So one is what I mentioned previously, multi-country lookalikes. So take this, I'm an advertiser, I'm actually, a good example is a company called Time. They sell a hair curling iron and they're from the USA. And what they were doing, they've been to the US, they've been to Canada, and they wanted to expand to Europe. So they use our regional targeting product to target Europe, but they still had to apply interest targeting and do very much manual individual lookalike audiences. They had to do one for, say, the UK, one for France, one for Spain, and it was all very individual and manual. And more importantly, that was very much an even distribution between those countries. But what we did was create a product called multi-country lookalike audiences, which would give them that European lookalike. And more importantly, it would look at all of Europe, take their best quality audience, their seed that they gave, and it would find the best people within Europe, which may not be evenly distributed. You may find, and our system will find it for you with that product, that actually your best performing audience is in certain countries and will do it automatically for you without you having to do it. So that's the first product. The second one worth mentioning is a multi-country, multi-city targeting. So take, for example, this. What this allows you to do is target cities in a region or a country or even worldwide between a certain population range.
Okay.
What we find from certain advertisers is that they require a certain population density to be successful, and hence they go city by city and expand that way. And this is a very easy way in your targeting to say, hey, I want to go to Africa and I want to target cities of a certain population. With a few flicks into targeting, you can get that. And again, market to just cities that you care about because they have the population density that you want.
All right, so we're going to pivot a little bit because I'm seeing a whole bunch of questions on this iPad about Instagram, and we get questions all the time about Instagram. So, Greg, this question's for you. Can I create global campaigns on Instagram as well?
Absolutely. I would say it makes a lot of sense to do so, and that kind of leads me to the topic of, I guess, placement optimization. So thank you for bringing that up, whoever asked the question. And I guess I'll refer back to almost like my marbles example, right? You want to always expand the supply of equal value. If there is more supply, it's much more cost efficient to reach the people that you need, right? And so think of it this way, like if you might have skewed delivery, right? So you might not necessarily have 50% on Facebook, 50% on Instagram. There might be different, but remember how we had the 2 marbles in one and 5 in the other? Is the same thing. At the end of the day, by combining them, you will have greater efficiency, even though the delivery might not be 50-50. So we definitely would say that might be a good idea.
Okay. And as an advertiser, should you be making changes to a bid throughout the day? So, for example, if it's more likely that you might reach a given audience during a certain part of the day, is that a change that you should be making?
Like day partying, for example, people mention that, yeah. Well, so the way we design the auction is we have something called pacing, right? And essentially pacing is a dynamic mechanism that allows us to essentially optimize the delivery of your campaign budget over the campaign lifetime, right? And that takes everything into account. So we will start with the cheapest possible people, the most cost efficient ones for you, for the target that you selected. And then we will work our way up marginally, right? So it is, for example, for just some example, right? Let's say on Monday, there's a lot of the same type of people that you want to reach come on Monday, and you wind up giving away half your budget. Well, our system will prevent that because then essentially, let's say if you have, let me start again. So if you have $10,000 for 10 days, right? If you give away, because it seems to be successful on Monday, half of your budget, you have half to spend the rest 9 days. And it's not going to be an optimal kind of a scenario. So what our pacing system does is if you wind up spending a little too much money, it actually starts pacing your bid down by multiplying your bid by a number between 0 and 1 in order for you to then get slightly lower bid into the auction, win slightly less auctions, right? And then maintain that budget in the most optimal fashion throughout the campaign period. And to go straight to your point in terms of the day parting and manual manipulation, I would say from what I've seen, the algorithm is really advanced, and we work again, just like we try to make Facebook simpler, we try to make the algorithm ever more accurate and ever more cost efficient for you, right? And so it already incorporates, time of day because or like day of week and all these different kind of factors implicitly in order to give you the most cost-effective delivery possible. And so while it is I would say it's up to you to evaluate your specific business case, we provide you the tools that you might want to, you don't have to do it, and you can use those resources to actually accomplish more and expand more.
Yeah, I've spoken to many advertisers, and they happen to love pacing, right?
Yep.
Because they might set a flight for 2 weeks or a campaign, for 2 weeks.
Yep.
And they don't want us spending money or all of their money in 2 days, right? So it's a matter of like managing expectations. Their business might require a campaign to be for 2 weeks, and that's important that we adhere to that, right?
Yep.
So my next question for you is, whether on Facebook or IG, how long should you run a campaign before deciding whether or not to stop it or continue it? Like, what does that do to your campaign?
The magic number, huh? I'm kidding. What I would say is this. It doesn't matter which part of the funnel your conversion is in. We estimated it takes our system about 25 conversions to calibrate, to predict kind of an accurate reading of how your ad performs.
Yeah.
And so if you want to base it at a certain minimum, I would leave about at least 25 conversions to do so.
At least 25 conversions?
Yeah.
Okay. And what about if you get much more than 25 conversions? Should you like slow things down? Should you stop, make adjustments?
I would say that it takes 25. Obviously, the more reads we get, the more accurate the system becomes. If there are significant issues after 25, 50, whatever, maybe 100, I would look into, again, what type of bid you're using, the targeting that you're using, right, the budget that you're setting for the country. But I wouldn't panic right away. I would let our system run, and it's like I said, you can use, let's say, auto bid as a price discovery mechanism if bid is an issue, for example, and you're not sure what you need to bid in that country to get the delivery that you need, that you're looking for. So I'll let our system run, and then if there are issues afterwards, we can dive in deeper and then kind of try to fix that.
That makes sense. That 25 number that Greg is talking about, that's per ad set, hopefully per week, right?
Yes.
All right, so Kara, I got one more question for you. All right, so before we go to the live audience, how should advertisers think about advertising if people do not know about their brand in other countries?
So I think this hints at a really important point of why should people care and how do you differentiate yourself in the space. So if you're offering something like, say, t-shirts, how are you different from every other retailer? What is your value proposition to people? Why should they buy from you? And more importantly, what does your company stand for? Why do they even care? And why should they interact with you over everybody else and over everything else that's going on in that moment? So I think that's really important to get across, not just for like memory and customer return, but also to really put a face on what you do.
Okay. And I'm starting, my iPad, whole bunch of questions are starting to flow in, right? And then we have some questions from before too. So you guys ready?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, Greg, this is along the lines of the question that you mentioned, the 25 conversion number,
Sure.
right? First of all, one, can you define conversion? And two, we have Will from the US who wants to know, is there a number of days that our system needs to actually become optimal, right?
Right. So essentially, it is not a matter of time. Thank you, Will, for the question. It's not a matter of time. It is literally a matter of conversions. And again, similar to the kind of the example I gave with flipping coins, right? The more you flip, you can take a week to flip twice. That's not necessarily going to give you a great read. It's the amount of observations that you have, right? That creates an accurate picture. And I would say, could you repeat, by the way, I'm sorry, the question?
So,
Besides, what is a conversion essentially?
yeah,
is
like
that the
what is
question,
is a conversion just a purchase?
No, so the thing that, and I mentioned, I would say conversion is anything at any point of the funnel. So it could be an app install.
Okay.
It could be, going through and purchasing the item.
Yeah.
like anything within the funnel, I would say.
Okay. So let's
What action are you trying to bid on, essentially?
Yeah, so let's say that action I'm trying to bid on is a purchase, and I'm not getting 20 to 25
Yep.
conversions, right? Then what do you recommend that I do in that situation as an advertiser?
So if after a while you haven't gotten it, we might want to examine, first of all, your targeting again, your creative, right? Because that might then involve like the organic bid and how that's influenced, and your overall bid and budget, right? So I would kind of divide it up into almost these kind of three categories. Targeting, you can review, but I would say, if we haven't, maybe try to expand it if possible. The bid and budget, like we mentioned before, you can use AutoBid as a price discovery mechanism. And finally, the organic bid, I would say, is look at how it's a reflection essentially of how relevant and enjoyable your creative is. And so I would say maybe try to see if there's a different type of creative that might be more applicable to the audience that you're trying to target in that example.
All right, so along those lines, we have a question from Paul, and Paul wants to know, so Paul has a t-shirt business, right? He's selling a lot of t-shirts, but he has relatively thin margins. Sure. So he wants to know if any of you guys could recommend anything or suggestions for him to get his shirts to scale, right?
Sure. I would say, first of all, it's great that you understand your business and what your margins are, because essentially our auction optimizes delivery if you understand the value of the action you're trying to elicit.
Okay.
And so if you know what the value of you selling that shirt is, I would say make sure that the max bid that you put in is equivalent to that value, right? And so this way it allows our system full range in order to find those people at any price point in order to get as much delivery, as many conversions as possible.
Okay.
I would also say take a look at your previous audiences that you've targeted before and use audience insights in the background to really try to understand where are they coming from and a little bit more information about them, because that will really help you tailor your creative and your message as well. So especially if you look at where people are coming from, you can see languages as well, and that might help you point to something that might need to be translated, or a creative that might not be speaking to the right audience. Somebody that doesn't look like them, maybe not resonating.
And just to add to that point there, even just thinking about where you're targeting as well, very simply, if you're only targeting, say, 1 or 2 countries, but you can ship to many more and serve many more, go to those countries, put them all in the same ad set. Because again, you may find that delivery looks at signals across all of them and finds you that magic conversion number, which again gives you better performance.
Okay. We have a question about lookalike audiences now. Mm-hmm. So I know we spoke about lookalike audiences a little earlier. Is it recommended to include all the countries you plan to target in that one lookalike, or split each country into its own?
So definitely the first approach there. By putting, as I mentioned earlier, by putting all the countries you want to target in that lookalike audience, we can then weight to the more similar people in that audience. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're targeting Europe. If you did individual lookalike audiences, you would have an even percentage of people in, say, UK, France, Spain, etc. to all of Europe. Mm-hmm. But realistically, when our system looks at all of Europe, we may find the customers who are more similar to your seed audience are actually more tending towards France, Germany, and Spain. And our multi-country lookalike audience will actually put more people in your lookalike audience from those countries and weight down smaller other countries where you may not see performance. So actually our system intelligently finds the best people for you if you put more countries in your lookalike audience.
Okay. And the next question, Kara, I know we always speak about creative, all right? We speak about creative all the time. And we have a question from Michael who wants to know, do we need a different creative for Instagram than for Facebook?
So this is a good question. I would say in the early days, yes. Instagram definitely skewed more towards professionals and really the inspirational feel of that. I don't think that part has necessarily changed, but really the best answer is you're going to have to experiment to find what works best for your business. Maybe your images are already really great and inspirational creative like you would find naturally on Instagram. If not, you might want to consider splitting those out and testing. So I would say test, reiterate, and figure out what works best for your particular business is the way to go.
All right, so let's say I figured it all out. I have a really amazing creative. CPAs are wonderful, right? Cost per action. But then over time, things are starting to get more and more expensive. Anybody want to chime into why that might be?
So, please.
Go ahead.
I mean, so I mentioned before that our system always seeks to deliver the most cost-efficient audience for the level that you've selected. And then if you want to expand your audience, it will be the next marginally more expensive person, right? So if you think about it, it's almost kind of like an exponential curve, right? Because it's a simple question. Again, it's like economics 101, it's supply and demand, right? If I want to reach, let's say, 30% of the audience, 30% of the market, for example, it'll find the cheapest people. And those people will have, let's say, a CPA of maybe, I don't know, $2, right? But the thing is, okay, now it needs to find more people. Well, we have already exhausted the cheapest people, so now we're going to add people who are maybe $3 or $4, right? And so your CPA is actually going to start like crawling up slightly. Now, it may seem counterintuitive, but this is actually an example of how Facebook gives you the most cost-efficient delivery no matter what, right? Instead of just charging an average price for the audience that you selected, right, and just charging a slightly higher price to kind of hedge, right? We will deliver you exactly who you want at the cheapest rate and then add on more people at a marginal rate.
Okay, I know we spoke about auto bid earlier, right? But I just want to go back to manual bid real quick. So there's a question from Romney. Romney wants to know, does bidding 3x or 4x more for your bid help you out in any way? Right? Like does that help your competitiveness in the auction? And what if you're trying to bid a really high number, but you don't necessarily have a great creative? Like, what kind of impact does that have?
So you guys please chime in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would say there's two components to what you've specifically asked. Is your bid competitive in the auction? And again, test it out. See if it is. You want to make sure that the value you're getting by selling your product, it justifies you spending. You obviously don't want to spend more than what it takes to, essentially selling at a loss, right? You want to make sure that you can justify the value. That's really important. The second bit is the creative. And that's really important as well, because essentially that part, what we call the organic bid, helps boost your delivery and make it more cost efficient. So if you can understand and you can test out like what people want to see in terms of the creative and what's relevant to them, it actually helps boost your delivery, essentially, right? And gives you not only advantage in winning the auction, but also in terms of the price that you pay.
I would also say the creative is like the face of your brand. So it should be something that you're proud of, and you also have to think about what you're competing against. We're always going to favor family, friends, personal connections first, because that's what people really care about, and that's what they're really on Facebook for. So that is what you're competing against. You have to compete against my friends having kids or my brother getting married this fall. Your creative has to be up to that level of personalization for me to interact with it. So I think that's really what it's honing in on, is not just thinking about the bid and trying to game the system, essentially, but really what's going to speak to people, what's more personal to them.
All right, move on to my next question. So this question is from Vivek, right, who is pinging us all the way from India.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Vivek wants to know, how do I find the right targeting for my industry? I'm running app install campaigns, and CPIs are pretty high. So cost per installs are pretty high for him. He's like, what should he do, right? He's trying to figure out what the right targeting is. How should he think about that?
Yeah, I can take
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Thank you for the question. So the first thing to think about is really testing and experimenting. But like, again, going back to that rule of not applying too narrow targeting, really try and use custom audience if you can of people who've installed your app previously, and then create a lookalike audience from that to find people similar to people who have already installed your app. Also important to note is, again, go broad with your targeting. You may be surprised of who actually likes your app, and it may be in different countries than you may be thinking. Again, treat Facebook as one massive country of all these people you could be marketing to, and if you do that and give us a good signals of people who have installed your app, that's the best way to set up your targeting in this case.
All right.
I think specifically, too, around app installs, we've seen a lot of really great examples with people starting off with worldwide targeting to literally see what pops, what countries are picking up on things. So to Jay's point, you might not know that something would work for you without trying it. So that really is a good way to see where in the world can you see really good results for installs.
And one more thing just to add as well there, app event optimization is also works very well as well. Let's say, Vivek, I'm not sure what your app is specifically, but let's say there's a certain action you want to actually drive within your app to drive value for your business. If you do worldwide targeting plus app event optimization, you actually see great results because we have the scale, plus app event optimization helps optimize to your business outcome that you're trying to drive, and again, give you the most valuable customers, not just the install.
Okay. We have a question from Tasega, and Jay, this is something that you touched on a little earlier. Is there a plan for lookalike audiences to be by state or city rather than country?
Not at the moment, no. A very
Okay.
simple answer. Thank you for the question, though.
Yeah, definitely. And this question going back to Greg. Greg, you're going to like this question a lot because we talk about this all the time.
Okay.
All right. So it has to do with budgets. This might be our first budget question, actually. Right. So when I increase budget, should I stop and duplicate the campaign, or can it be increased mid-flight? And what's the impacts of increasing budgets for CPAs?
So I would say if you're going to increase the budget, you would want to do it. We don't want to incentivize people to stop and then go and recreate different kind of campaigns. I would say let the campaign run at least for a little while, as we mentioned, right? Just so we can get a read on it, right? And if after a while, it doesn't have to be a month at a time. It could be a week or two, for example, right? But once we have enough time, once we have enough observations, if it's not working, then we can, once that campaign period is done, we can then readjust the budget for the following campaign. I think that is, we don't want to incentivize people to start kind of tweaking budgets and bids like mid-campaign, because I think then we won't get a really good read on it, and we won't actually have information to then improve your auction performance in the future.
Definitely. So it sounds like in general, it makes our system have to work harder, right? It's like it kind of sends us back. It's like you're making changes and everything like that, then we have to work harder, and then it takes a longer time for us to optimize. Okay. And I have a question about overlapping audiences. This is from Danny. Essentially, when you have overlapping audiences, do they compete against each other?
No. So in the auction, essentially, we have a mechanism of deduping. So we will actually look at, put it this way, we will actually see which ad performs the best, right? Because we want to maximize the value for the advertiser as well as maximize the user experience. But in this case, is the advertiser value. So essentially, it's going to be the ad with the most value that's going to essentially dominate and win the auction. I would say if you can, I would try to have, again, the simplest possible layout for your campaigns as possible. So you just have one campaign as broad reach as possible as well, because you're going to get better results. And people, people ask about micro-targeting, and they say, for example, oh, well, if I have different creative for every segment, but you mentioned the organic bid, so wouldn't that help me out? But think about when you micro-target, you don't really give the system enough space to really work its magic, right? And I think that there's also extra production costs. We try to work, like I said, we work hard to try to incentivize the simplest possible operation, and that will give you the best results overall.
Well, I think on the flip side, too, like trying to interpret the data from all those micro segments is probably going to drive you a little nuts. And good luck, unless you have a data scientist working around the clock for you. It's going to be really hard to figure out what is actually working. That's not a great way of testing, so think about it that way, too.
Absolutely.
And just to build on that, like some of the best case studies we've seen are businesses who just say, look, I can serve all of Europe, but I'm going to try in English and just experiment and see what happens. Again, some of the best return on ad spends come from that because they're just trying, they're testing, but not going for like, let me think about this one segment and what creative I need, this another segment, what segment I need. They just say, let me just try it, see what happens, and experiment from there.
Okay. So a lot of great information regarding expanding outside of your home region or country. If you guys, and I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to think about this.
Boy.
If you guys could think about one thing that you want to leave with the audience, right? You want them to remember it cold. What would that one thing be? Okay. Karen, I'm going to start with you, but I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, though. You guys have a little bit more time to think about it.
Thanks.
Not fair. Sure, the woman in the group. I would say don't be afraid to experiment. We've seen it time and time again that really leads to the best insights and some of the best business results. So don't be afraid of that, and we have worldwide targeting for a reason, so why not experiment?
Yeah. For me personally, I think it kind of goes back, from all the metaphors I probably use, you might already know this. I kind of try to bring it back to kind of economics 101, right? So it's just very, very basic business, and especially supply and demand. And whether it's kind of the targeting, whether you're trying to go for different audiences, you want to understand how the pricing is changing. I think it's very helpful to step back for a second, not overcomplicate things with jargon, and think about the supply and demand dynamics in the market of the audience that you're trying to seek.
Yeah, just to build on what both of them said there, treat Facebook as a country of 1.9 billion people, right? And make sure you put as many people as possible that you can serve all in one ad set. Because our system can then do the best possible job it can do at finding you the conversions or the business outcomes that matter for you.
All right, that's awesome. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I wish I can clap right now, but I'm holding an iPad. But so I'm going to close up right here. So that concludes our Q&A for episode 3. If you have a question that we did not have an opportunity to get to, please, we're going to send out a whole bunch of links later. We're going to send out some other additional resources for any question that went unanswered. We're going to make sure to answer those questions on a document and post this document later on in the week. Lastly, if you know of any businesses or advertisers that are interested in learning more about cross-border targeting or Facebook's ads platform, please share this video and please also like the video. Thanks again for joining and look forward to seeing you next time.